The camera captures Judge Frank Caprio glancing down at the file before him, his reading glasses perched at the end of his nose. There's a slight furrow of his brow, the kind that appears when something in the paperwork doesn't quite add up. Inspector Quinn, standing to his right, exchanges a quick look with the court clerk. Something about this case has already caught their attention. The double doors at the back of the Providence Municipal Courtroom swing open, and in walks a woman who seems entirely out of place. Victoria Ashworth Kensington is dressed in a tailored cream-colored Chanel suit, her silver blonde hair swept into an immaculate chignon. Diamonds glitter at her ears and wrists, the kind of jewelry that costs more than most people's annual salary. Her heels click against the worn courthouse floor with a precise, measured cadence. She carries herself with the rigid posture of someone who has never had to apologize for anything in her life. The gallery stirs. Whispers ripple through the rows of defendants waiting their turn, young mothers with crying babies, elderly men clutching crumpled citations, teenagers nervously bouncing their legs. They all turn to look at this woman who seems to have wandered in from a different world entirely. Judge Caprio watches her approach the podium. His expression is unreadable, but those who know him well, those who have watched hundreds of hours of his courtroom proceedings, can detect the faintest hint of curiosity in his eyes. He's seen everything in this courtroom. He's seen the desperate and the defiant, the remorseful and the reckless. But something about Victoria Ashworth Kensington is different. "Good morning," Judge Caprio says, his voice warm but measured. He removes his glasses and sets them on the bench before him. "You're here regarding a parking violation from October 15th of last year. Parking in a handicapped space at the Providence Place Mall." Victoria's chin lifts almost imperceptibly. "That's correct, Your Honor." Her voice is clipped, aristocratic, the kind of accent that suggests old money and older expectations. There's no tremor in it, no hint of the nervousness that usually accompanies people standing before a judge. If anything, she sounds almost bored. Judge Caprio leans back in his chair, studying her. "The fine is $250. But I see here you've contested the citation. You want to explain to me what happened?" The courtroom holds its collective breath. Inspector Quinn shifts his weight, his hand resting on the file folder that contains the photographic evidence. The citation is clear-cut, a silver Mercedes-Benz S-Class, parked squarely in a handicapped spot. No placard visible in the windshield, no plates indicating disability exemption. "I parked there for less than 3 minutes, Victoria says, her tone suggesting this should end the matter entirely. "I was picking up a purchase." The store was closing. There were no other spaces available. A murmur goes through the gallery. Someone in the back row snorts audibly. Judge Caprio's eyebrows rise slightly, but his expression remains patient. 3 minutes, he repeats. And in those 3 minutes, where was the person who needed that handicapped space supposed to park? Victoria's perfectly lined lips pressed together. "I hardly think." "Mom." Judge Caprio's voice is still gentle, but there's steel beneath the velvet. "I've been doing this for a long time, and in all those years, I've heard every excuse you can imagine. But I want you to think about something. Think about a mother trying to get her child in a wheelchair out of the car. Think about a veteran who lost his leg serving this country. Think about an elderly woman with a walker who can barely make it 20 feet without resting." He pauses, letting his words settle over the courtroom like a blanket. 3 minutes to you is an eternity to them. Victoria's jaw tightens. For a moment, something flickers behind her eyes, something that looks almost like pain. But it's gone before anyone can be certain it was there at all. Your Honor, with all due respect, I'm prepared to pay the fine. I simply wanted to explain the circumstances. Judge Caprio nods slowly, but he doesn't reach for his gavel. Instead, he leans forward, resting his forearms on the bench. His posture shifts from judicial to conversational, a signature move that has made him famous across the internet, beloved by millions who have watched his courtroom clips. Mrs. Ashworth Kensington, he says, and his voice drops to something almost intimate. Tell me about yourself. The question catches her off guard. Her composure, so carefully maintained, shows its first crack, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible hesitation. I'm sorry. Tell me about yourself, Judge Caprio repeats. What do you do? Where are you from? I want to know who I'm talking to here. Victoria glances around the courtroom as if seeking an escape route. The gallery watches with rapt attention. This isn't what anyone expected. They came to see a wealthy woman get her comeuppance, to watch Judge Caprio put her in her place. But Caprio isn't performing for the crowd. He's doing something else entirely, something that has made his courtroom different from any other in America. He's trying to see her. Really see her. I'm a philanthropist, Victoria finally says, and there's a defensive edge to her voice now. I serve on the boards of several charities. The Rhode Island Children's Foundation, the Providence Arts Council, the Ashworth Family Trust, which my late husband established before. She stops abruptly, as if she's said too much. Judge Caprio's expression softens almost imperceptibly. Your late husband, he says gently. I'm sorry for your loss. When did he pass? The courtroom is so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Victoria Ashworth Kensington, this woman who walked in like she owned the building, suddenly looks very small behind the defendant's podium. 14 months ago, she says. Her voice is barely above a whisper. October 12. Inspector Quinn's head snaps up. He flips open the file and checks the date of the citation. October 15C. 3 days after her husband's death. Judge Caprio has noticed it too. His eyes meet Quinn's for just a moment, and something passes between them, an understanding that this case has just become something else entirely. October 15C, Judge Caprio says slowly. That was 3 days after your husband died. It's not a question. It's an invitation. Victoria's hand trembles as she reaches up to touch the diamond pendant at her throat, a gesture that seems more reflexive than conscious. Her composure is crumbling now, piece by piece, like a wall that's been holding back a flood. Yes, she says. 3 days. The courtroom waits. Judge Caprio waits. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the woman who walked in wearing armor begins to let it fall away. Judge Caprio removes his glasses completely and sets them aside. It's a gesture his regular viewers recognize he does it when he's preparing to have a real conversation, when the formalities of the courtroom are about to give way to something more human. Tell me about that day, he says. October 15th. What were you doing at the mall? Victoria's hand is still at her throat, her fingers wrapped around the diamond pendant as if it's a lifeline. She takes a breath, the first unsteady breath anyone has seen from her, and begins to speak. My husband. Richard, He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 18 months before he died. By the time they found it, it had already spread. The doctors gave him 6 months. He fought for 12. Her voice is stronger now, but there's a rawness to it that wasn't there before. The aristocratic affect is fading, revealing something more authentic beneath. I was his primary caregiver for the last 8 months. We had nurses, of course, a full medical team. But Richard, he only wanted me. He said I was the only one who could make him feel like himself, not like a patient. She pauses, and in that pause, the courtroom sees something remarkable. Tears are forming in the eyes of Victoria Ashworth Kensington, this woman who seemed made of ice and diamonds just minutes ago. I didn't sleep for the last 3 weeks of his life. Not really. An hour here, an hour there, always in the chair beside his bed. I held his hand when he took his last breath. And then I had to plan a funeral, notify the family, handle the lawyers and the estate and the endless paperwork of death. Judge Caprio nods slowly. That's a heavy burden, he says, for anyone. October 15th, Victoria continues, and now the words are flowing like water through a broken dam. I went to the mall because Richard had ordered something before he died. A gift for our granddaughter's birthday. She was turning 7 on October 20th, and he knew. He knew he wouldn't be there. So he ordered a special music box from a shop at Providence Place. A custom piece. It plays Claire de Lune. It was the song he used to play for her on the piano. The gallery has gone completely still. The woman who snorted earlier is wiping her eyes. A young mother in the 3rd row is clutching her baby a little tighter. The shop called to say it was ready, but they were closing early that day. Some kind of inventory issue. I had 1 hour to get there, or I would have to wait until the following week, and Emma's birthday. I couldn't miss it. I couldn't let Richard's last gift to her be late. Judge Caprio's voice is very gentle now. So you drove to the mall. I drove to the mall. Victoria's composure finally breaks. A tear slides down her cheek, leaving a track through her carefully applied makeup. I hadn't slept in days. I was running on coffee and grief, and the desperate need to do this one thing right. This one last thing for Richard. And when I got there, the parking lot was full. Every space. Every single space, except the handicapped spot. Judge Caprio finishes. I told myself it would only be a minute. I told myself nobody would need it. I told myself. She stops, shaking her head. I told myself a lot of things that day. None of them were true. I was so tired. I was so broken. I couldn't think straight. Inspector Quinn steps forward slightly, holding the citation file. But Judge Caprio raises a hand, a subtle gesture that says not yet. Mrs. Ashworth Kensington, he says, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. That parking ticket was at the first time you've ever done something like that. Parked in a handicapped space when you shouldn't have? Victoria meets his eyes. There's no defiance left in her gaze, only exhaustion and something that looks like shame. Never, she says. My mother was in a wheelchair for the last 10 years of her life. Multiple sclerosis. I used to push her through parking lots, watching people park in those spaces and run into stores like they owned the world. I hated those people. I swore I would never be one of them. She laughs bitterly, and it's the first genuine sound she's made since entering the courtroom. And yet, here I am. Judge Caprio is quiet for a long moment. The camera captures his expression thoughtful, compassionate, weighing something invisible in the air between them. You said you're a philanthropist, he says. Tell me about the work you do. Victoria seems surprised by the shift in questioning, but she answers. The Rhode Island Children's Foundation provides scholarships for underprivileged students. Last year, we funded full rides for 47 children. The Providence Arts Council supports local artists and brings music and theater programs to underserved schools. And the Ashworth Family Trust. She hesitates. Go on, Judge Caprio encourages. The trust provides financial assistance to families dealing with cancer. We pay for treatments, transportation to hospitals, childcare during chemotherapy sessions. Richard started it after his first diagnosis, a smaller cancer, caught early, that he beat. He said he was lucky. He could afford the best care. He wanted to give that luck to others. Judge Caprio nods slowly. And how much has the trust given away? If you don't mind my asking. Since its founding? Approximately $47 million. A gasp ripples through the gallery. $47 million. The number hangs in the air, impossible to ignore. 47 million, Judge Caprio repeats. That's a lot of families, a lot of lives. Richard believed that wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege. He used to say that money means nothing if it just sits in a vault. It only has value when it moves, when it helps, when it heals. He sounds like he was a good man, Judge Caprio says. He was the best man I've ever known. The judge leans back in his chair, and something shifts in his expression. The viewers, who have watched countless Caprio videos, recognize this moment. It's the moment when the case stops being about the citation and starts being about the person. He pauses, and the courtroom leans in collectively. The question I have to ask myself is this: who is Victoria Ashworth Kensington? Is she the woman who parked in a handicapped space on the worst week of her life? Or is she the woman who has spent decades helping children and families and cancer patients? Is she defined by her worst moment or by the sum of all her moments? The question hangs in the air, unanswered. But something is changing in the courtroom. The hostility that greeted Victoria when she walked in is fading, replaced by something else. Understanding, perhaps. Or recognition, the recognition that everyone, no matter how wealthy or polished, carries pain they cannot show. Judge Caprio reaches for a tissue from the box on his bench, a fixture of his courtroom, always within reach for moments exactly like this, and hands it to the bailiff to pass to Victoria. She accepts it with a murmured thank you, dabbing at her eyes while trying to maintain what's left of her composure. I want to go back to something you said, Judge Caprio says, his voice soft but probing. You mentioned you were your husband's primary caregiver for 8 months. Yes. 8 months of watching someone you love fade away. 8 months of holding it together for them, being strong for them. And then he was gone, and 3 days later, you had to drive to a mall to pick up a music box. Victoria nods, unable to speak. Who was taking care of you during all of this? The question stops Victoria cold. Her hand freezes halfway to her face, the tissue clutched between trembling fingers. For a long moment, she doesn't answer. The courtroom waits. I don't. I don't understand the question. It's a simple question, Judge Caprio says gently. You spent 8 months caring for your husband. You handled his medical needs, his emotional needs, the logistics of his dying. You planned his funeral. You dealt with his estate. Who was taking care of you? Who made sure you ate dinner? Who held you when you cried? Who reminded you that you were human too? Victoria's face crumples. It's not the controlled tears she shed earlier. This is something deeper, something that's been buried under layers of responsibility and expectation. A sound escapes her that's almost like a laugh, but broken, jagged at the edges. No one, she whispers. There was no one. Judge Caprio leans forward. No family? No friends? Our children. They came for the funeral, of course. But they live far away, California, London. They have their own lives, their own families. Richard's sisters. We were never close. And my friends. She trails off, shaking her head. What about your friends? Judge Caprio presses gently. When you're married to a wealthy man, Your Honor, you learn something quickly. You don't have friends. You have people who want things from you. People who smile at your face and gossip behind your back. People who show up at parties but disappear when there's actual need. When Richard got sick, the invitations dried up. Nobody wants to be around death. It's too inconvenient. The bitterness in her voice is palpable, but underneath it is something else, loneliness. A bone-deep isolation that money cannot touch. Judge Caprio removes his glasses again, rubbing the bridge of his nose. When he looks at Victoria again, there's something in his eyes that wasn't there before recognition, perhaps understanding. Mrs. Ashworth Kensington, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. Victoria straightens, bracing herself for judgment. My wife and I have been married for over 50 years, and I can tell you that the thought of losing her, the thought of watching her suffer, of holding her hand as she leaves this world, it's the thing that terrifies me most in life, more than anything else. The courtroom is absolutely silent. Judge Caprio doesn't often share personal details from the bench, but when he does, everyone pays attention. I can't imagine what you went through. I can't imagine the strength it took to care for your husband, to be his rock, to hold yourself together when everything was falling apart. And I certainly can't imagine doing it alone. Victoria's tears are flowing freely now, and she's not trying to hide them anymore. But here's what I know, Judge Caprio continues. Grief doesn't care how much money you have. Pain doesn't care about diamonds or designer suits. When you lose the person you love most in this world, you're just like everyone else. You're lost. You're broken. You're trying to survive one moment at a time. He gestures around the courtroom at the young mother in the third row, at the elderly man clutching his citation, at the teenagers and the workers, and the whole spectrum of humanity that fills his courtroom every day. Everyone in this room has their own struggles, their own pain, their own moments of weakness. That's what I've learned, doing this job for all these years. We're all just people, trying our best and sometimes failing. The measure of a person isn't whether they fail, we all fail. The measure is what they do next. Judge Caprio pauses, And when he speaks again, his voice is barely above a whisper. "So let me ask you, Mrs. Ashworth Kensington, what have you done since that day?" Victoria wipes her eyes, steadying herself. When she speaks, her voice is stronger than it's been all morning. "I've thought about it constantly. About the person who might have needed that space. About the example I failed to set. And I've tried to do better. I've tried to honor Richard's memory by being the person he believed I was." "Tell me specifically. What have you done?" "I increased the Ashworth Trust's funding by 15%. I personally visited 12 families we've helped this year. Not through my assistants, I went myself. I sat with mothers in hospital waiting rooms. I held the hands of patients going through chemotherapy. I listened to their stories." She takes a shaky breath. "And I've started volunteering at the Rhode Island Food Bank every Saturday morning. Richard always said I should do more hands-on work, but I was too busy with galas and board meetings. After he died, I realized that wasn't enough. Writing checks isn't enough. You have to show up. You have to be present." Judge Caprio's face breaks into a slow smile, the kind of smile that has made millions of people fall in love with his courtroom. "The Rhode Island Food Bank," he says. "You know something?" "I know some people who volunteer there. Good people. Salt of the earth." "They are," Victoria agrees. "They've taught me more about real generosity in 6 months than I learned in 60 years of charity galas." Inspector Quinn steps forward, leaning in to whisper something to Judge Caprio. The judge nods, his eyebrows rising slightly. He turns back to Victoria with a curious expression. "Inspector Quinn just told me something interesting. It seems you've made a donation to our court's community outreach program. A rather significant one." Victoria's cheeks flush. "I prefer that remain private, Your Honor. Unfortunately, court records are public. And according to what I'm seeing here, you donated $100,000 to fund transportation assistance for defendants who can't afford to get to their court dates." The gallery erupts in murmurs. $100,000 to help people get to court. Victoria looks down at her hands. "I missed my own court date twice. The first time because I couldn't face leaving the house. The second time because I forgot what day it was. Grief does that, it erases time. I thought about how hard that must be for someone who doesn't have a car, or who can't take time off work, or who has children to care for. I wanted to help." Judge Caprio shakes his head slowly, a look of wonder on his face. "Mrs. Ashworth Kensington, you are not at all what I expected when you walked through those doors." For the first time since entering the courtroom, Victoria laughs a real laugh, surprised and almost girlish. "Neither are you, Your Honor." Just as the tension in the courtroom seems to be easing, the doors at the back swing open again. Everyone turns to look, including Judge Caprio, whose eyebrows rise in surprise. A young woman enters, perhaps 30 years old, pushing an elderly man in a wheelchair. The man is frail, his hands gnarled with arthritis, an oxygen tube running beneath his nose. But his eyes are sharp, alert, taking in the scene before him with obvious interest. "Excuse me," the young woman calls out, her voice carrying across the courtroom. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to say something about this case." The bailiff moves to intercept her, but Judge Caprio raises a hand. "Hold on," he says. "Let's hear what she has to say." Ma'am, approach the bench and tell me who you are. The young woman wheels the elderly man down the center aisle, coming to a stop beside Victoria. Victoria stares at them in confusion, clearly having no idea who these people are. My name is Maria Santos, the woman says, and this is my father, Eduardo Santos. We were at Providence Place Mall on October 15th of last year. Victoria's face goes pale. The courtroom collectively holds its breath. My father has COPD and severe arthritis, Maria continues. He can barely walk 10 feet without help. We had a medical appointment that day, a specialist at a clinic near the mall. We were running late because traffic was terrible, and when we got there, we drove around and around looking for a handicapped space. Judge Caprio leans forward, his expression grave. And there wasn't one available? There was one. But a silver Mercedes was parked in it. Victoria's hand flies to her mouth. The color drains from her face entirely. This is it, the moment she's been dreading, the consequence she's been unable to escape, no matter how many donations she makes or volunteer hours she logs. The person she hurt has come to face her. We had to park far away, Maria says. My father couldn't make it. We tried. He wanted to try, but halfway across the parking lot, he collapsed. He couldn't breathe. I had to call an ambulance. Let her finish, Judge Caprio says gently. Maria looks at Victoria, and something unexpected happens. Her expression softens. She pauses, glancing down at her father, who reaches up and takes her hand. Papa, Maria says, looking down at her father. Do you want to say something? Eduardo Santos leans forward in his wheelchair, his oxygen tube hissing softly. When he speaks, his voice is thin but clear, accented with the music of his Puerto Rican heritage. Si ora, he says, addressing Victoria directly. I was angry at you for a long time. Very angry. When I was lying in that hospital bed, unable to breathe, I thought about the person in that car. I wondered if they knew, if they cared. Victoria is crying openly now, making no effort to wipe away her tears. But then something happened, Eduardo continues. A social worker came to visit me. She said there was a new program, a fund that would pay for my transportation to medical appointments. She said a donation had made it possible. A large donation from someone who wanted to help people like me get where they needed to go. He pauses, his eyes finding Victoria's. That donation came from you, didn't it? Victoria nods, unable to speak. Because of that program, I haven't missed an appointment in 6 months. My health has improved. My doctor says, if we keep this up, I might have several more years. Years I didn't think I would have. Judge Caprio removes his glasses and wipes his eyes. In all his years on the bench, in all the viral videos and emotional moments, few have matched this. Si ora, Eduardo says. I came here today to tell you something. I forgive you. What you did was wrong. You know that. I know that. But what you did after? That was right. That was good. And because of it, I am still here. Victoria steps forward, and without thinking about courtroom protocol or propriety or any of the social rules that have governed her entire life, she drops to her knees beside Eduardo's wheelchair and takes his weathered hands in hers. I am so sorry, she says, and her voice breaks on every word. I will never forgive myself for what happened to you. Never. But I promise you, I promise, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. Not just for you, for everyone. Eduardo squeezes her hands. That is all any of us can do, Ciora. Try to make it right. The gallery is weeping openly. The young mother in the third row is sobbing into her baby's blanket. Even Inspector Quinn, stoic and professional to a fault, is blinking rapidly and looking at the ceiling. Judge Caprio clears his throat. When he speaks, his voice is thick with emotion. In all my years on this bench, I have never seen anything quite like this. We have a defendant who committed a violation. We have a victim who was genuinely harmed. And yet, somehow, in the space of this courtroom, we have witnessed something extraordinary, genuine remorse, genuine forgiveness, and genuine grace. He looks at Eduardo Santos. Mr. Santos, I want to thank you. What you just did coming here, speaking those words that takes a kind of courage and generosity that humbles me. You could have come here seeking revenge, seeking to see this woman punished. Instead, you chose mercy. That's not weakness. That's strength of the highest order. Eduardo nods, a small smile on his weathered face. My mama always said, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I'm too old for poison, Your Honor. Despite the tears, a ripple of laughter moves through the courtroom. Judge Caprio chuckles warmly. Your mama was a wise woman. The wisest. Victoria rises from her knees, still holding Eduardo's hands. She looks at Maria. I want to do something for your family. Please, let me. Maria shakes her head. You already have. The transportation program has changed our lives. Other families too. That's enough. Then let me expand it. Let me fund it permanently. Let me make sure no one ever has to choose between their health and their ability to get to an appointment. She turns to Judge Caprio, her eyes blazing with a determination that wasn't there before. But standing here, looking at Mr. Santos, I think I finally understand what he meant. That parking ticket, that stupid, shameful mistake, led me here. It led me to create a program that's helping people. It led me to meet the man I hurt and receive his forgiveness. And it led me to realize that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of a new one. Judge Caprio smiles a warm, grandfatherly smile that has made him beloved by millions. Mrs. Ashworth Kensington, I believe you're absolutely right. Judge Caprio taps his fingers on the bench, the way he always does when he's considering his verdict. The courtroom waits in hushed anticipation. This is the moment, the ruling that will determine how this story ends. Mrs. Ashworth Kensington, he begins, let me tell you what I see when I look at your case file. I see a violation. Clear and documented. You parked in a handicapped space without authorization. The fine is $250. That's what the law says. Victoria nods, accepting the judgment. But I've never believed that the law is just about punishment. The law is about justice. And justice isn't black and white. It's 1,000 shades of gray, requiring wisdom and compassion and the ability to see the whole person, not just their worst moment. He picks up the citation, holding it between his fingers. What I see when I look at you is a woman who made a mistake on the worst day of her life. A woman who was drowning in grief, running on empty, trying to fulfill her dying husband's last wish for his granddaughter. Was what she did wrong? Absolutely. Did it cause harm? We've heard today that it did real, serious harm. He glances at Eduardo Santos, who nods solemnly. But I also see a woman who has taken responsibility, who has tried to make amends, who has donated her time and her money and her heart to helping others. And most importantly, I see a woman who has been forgiven by the very person she harmed. Judge Caprio sets down the citation and folds his hands. In this court, we talk a lot about accountability. People have to be held accountable for their actions. That's the foundation of any just society. But accountability isn't just about punishment. It's about making things right. It's about learning and growing and becoming better. He looks at Victoria with something like admiration. You have done that, Mrs. Ashworth Kensington. You have taken a moment of weakness and transformed it into an ongoing commitment to service. You have turned your grief into a gift for others. And you have shown this courtroom something I always try to remember, but sometimes forget, that wealth and privilege don't make someone immune to pain, and that the human heart is the same, whether it beats in a mansion or a tenement. He reaches for his gavel, then pauses. The fine for this violation is $250. Normally, I would assess that fine and move on to the next case. But today is not a normal day. Victoria holds her breath. The gallery leans forward. I'm dismissing all fines and court costs associated with this citation. A murmur of surprise ripples through the courtroom. Victoria's eyes widen. Your Honor, I don't. I came here expecting to pay. I know you did. And if I thought for one moment that you needed the punishment to learn your lesson, I would impose it. But you've already learned it. You've paid a price far higher than any fine I could assess in sleepless nights, in guilt, in the memory of what you did when you weren't at your best. He leans forward, his voice intensifying. But here's what I want you to do instead. That $250, I want you to take it and give it to someone who needs it. Not through the foundation, not through your trust. Personally, I want you to find someone who's struggling, maybe someone here in this courtroom, maybe someone at the food bank, maybe someone you pass on the street, and I want you to help them. Directly, human being to human being. Victoria's hand goes to her heart. I will. I promise you, I will. And one more thing. Judge Caprio's voice softens, becoming almost fatherly. I want you to take care of yourself. I want you to find someone to talk to, a friend, a counselor, someone who can share the weight you've been carrying alone. Your husband loved you. He would want you to be happy. He would want you to heal. Victoria's composure finally crumbles entirely. She weeps openly, clutching the tissue like a lifeline. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Judge Caprio smiles, and in that smile is everything that has made him a viral sensation, a beloved figure, a reminder that the legal system can still have a human heart. Case dismissed. Good luck to you, Mrs. Ashworth Kensington. And Mr. Santos, you keep taking care of that health of yours. I expect to see you dancing at your great-grandchildren's weddings. Eduardo laughs, a wheezing but joyful sound. From your mouth to God's ears, Your Honor. As Victoria steps away from the podium, something unprecedented happens. The gallery begins to applaud. Not the polite, scattered applause of a formal occasion, but a genuine, heartfelt ovation. The young mother, the elderly man with his crumpled citation, the teenagers, the workers, all of them brought together in this moment by something larger than themselves. Victoria stops in the aisle, overwhelmed. She turns back to look at Judge Caprio, who gives her a small wave, almost shy, almost bashful, as if the emotion of the moment has caught even him off guard. Then she does something that surprises everyone, including herself. She walks to Eduardo Santos, still in his wheelchair, and bends down to embrace him. He hugs her back, this frail old man and this wealthy widow, two people who should have been enemies but have become something else entirely. The camera captures Judge Caprio, watching this scene, and his eyes are glistening. He clears his throat and shuffles the papers on his desk, composing himself. "Next case," he calls out, and his voice is rougher than usual. "Let's keep things moving." But as the bailiff calls the next name, Judge Caprio takes a moment. He looks out at his courtroom, at the people who come through his doors every day, seeking justice, seeking mercy, seeking hope. And in that moment, he remembers why he does this, why he's been doing this for decades, why he'll keep doing it for as long as he can. Because every person who stands before him has a story. Every citation, every violation, every legal infraction is connected to a human being with struggles and dreams and heartbreak. And if you take the time to listen, really listen, you discover that the line between the righteous and the fallen is thinner than anyone wants to admit. We are all capable of our best and our worst. What defines us is what we do when we realize the difference. The measure of a person isn't whether they fail, we all fail. The measure is what they do next. Judge Frank Caprio. As Victoria Ashworth Kensington walks out of the Providence Municipal Court, the camera catches one final image. Her hand is still clasped in Maria Santos's, the two women walking side by side into the morning light. Behind them, Eduardo's wheelchair rolls smoothly, the old man looking up at the sky with the expression of someone who has witnessed a miracle. And in a way, they all have. Not a miracle of angels or divine intervention, but a miracle of humanity. The miracle that happens when we choose compassion over condemnation, when we see the person instead of the violation, when we remember that every stranger we meet is fighting a battle we know nothing about. That's what Judge Caprio teaches us, case after case, verdict after verdict. That's why his courtroom has become a beacon for millions who have lost faith in the justice system. That's why his clips go viral, shared by people who desperately need to believe that somewhere, somehow, mercy still exists. Because it does. It exists in a municipal court in Providence, Rhode Island, where an elderly judge with kind eyes and a warm smile reminds us every single day what it means to be human. The end.